There is a specific quiet terror in an empty room. You know this feeling. The television is finally turned off. The phone screen goes black, leaving only a reflection of your tired eyes. And in that sudden, profound vacuum of stimulation, a heavy, familiar dread begins to surface in your chest. It is the echo of an old grief, the sting of a recent humiliation, or perhaps just a vague, shapeless anxiety that whispers, "You're not doing enough, not being enough." What do you do in this moment? If you are like most of the modern world, you do not sit with it. You flee. You pick the phone back up. You open another tab. You pour a drink. You call someone you do not even particularly like just to fill the air with noise. You build entire architectures of distraction to avoid spending 5 unsupervised minutes in the dark with your own mind. We have convinced ourselves that emotional pain is an invader, a lethal pathogen that must be eradicated or outrun. But there is a bitter psychological paradox at play here. One that the ancients understood deeply. The energy required to endlessly outrun your pain is infinitely more exhausting than the pain itself. By running from your suffering, you are not escaping it. You are guaranteeing it. 2,000 years ago, the Stoic philosopher Epictetus noted that we are not disturbed by things themselves, but by the views we take of them. In the modern era, we have weaponized this concept against ourselves. We feel an uncomfortable sensation, a pang of rejection, a wave of sadness, and immediately our mind layers a terrifying narrative over it. We tell ourselves, this is unbearable. If I let this feeling in, it will destroy me. I must avoid it at all costs. The Stoics understood a concept regarding the mind's interpretation of reality, often tied to our power of assent or prohairesis. They realized that the raw sensation of grief or anger is natural. It is simply a physical and emotional reflex. It is our resistance to that reflex, our desperate, flailing attempt to deny reality that generates true suffering. Modern psychology echoes this ancient wisdom. When you actively suppress an emotion, you signal to your nervous system that this internal feeling is a mortal threat. Your brain shifts into a state of chronic hypervigilance. You begin fighting a phantom of your own creation. The Stoic alternative is not a hack, nor is it a weapon to dominate your psychology. It is a quiet, radical shift in perspective. What if the pain you are running from is not a monster trying to consume you, but simply a weather pattern passing through the ecosystem of your mind? To understand why running fails, we must look at the subconscious mechanics of repression. Unfelt pain does not simply evaporate. It ferments. When you refuse to process a localized ache, say the sorrow of a lost relationship or the sting of a professional failure, it does not go away. It goes underground. It undergoes a dark alchemy, transmuting from a specific, identifiable wound into a generalized, free-floating anxiety. It becomes the low-grade tension in your jaw. It becomes the sudden snap of anger at a stranger in traffic. It becomes the reason you cannot sleep. Think of it as an emotional debt. Every time you distract yourself from a painful truth, you are putting it on a psychological credit card with an extortionate interest rate. You are trading a moment of immediate discomfort for a lifetime of chronic, suffocating unease. The tragic irony of the chronic runner is that they spend their entire existence bracing for an impact that has already happened. You cannot outrun a wound you have already sustained. The arrow is already in you. Pulling it out hurts, yes, but leaving it and burying it under layers of forced positivity, frantic workaholism, or endless entertainment guarantees an infection that will slowly poison your entire life. Many who seek out philosophy, particularly Stoicism, do so for the wrong reasons. They are looking for an anesthetic. They want to be cold, untouchable, unaffected by the chaotic world of human emotion. They build what they believe is a fortress of strength, but it is actually a prison of apathy. True Stoic composure is not the absence of emotion. It is the refusal to be tyrannized by it. When you attempt to numb your pain, you run into a stark biological reality. You cannot selectively numb the human heart. The same neural pathways that process grief, rejection, and sorrow are the exact same pathways that process joy, connection, and peace. If you construct a wall thick enough to keep out the agony of loss, that same wall will block out the warmth of genuine connection. This is the state of the modern distracted soul. Safe, but entirely hollow. Numbness is not quiet power. It is a brittle, fragile defense mechanism. It requires constant maintenance. The moment the distractions stop, the fortress cracks. True resilience feels entirely different. It does not look like a stone wall. It looks like the deep ocean. The surface may be battered by a violent storm. You may weep, you may grieve, you may feel the tearing of your heart, but miles beneath the surface there is an undisturbed, quiet stillness. The strong do not silence the storm. They anchor themselves beneath it. So what happens when you finally stop running? What does it actually look like to turn around and face the phantom? It is rarely cinematic. It is usually deeply uncomfortable, stark, and painfully ordinary. When you sit in that empty room and allow the dread to rise without reaching for your phone, the first thing you will feel is an overwhelming urge to escape. Your brain will scream at you to move, to fix, to distract. But if you hold your ground, if you simply observe the physical sensation of the pain, without judging it, without wishing it away, without attaching a catastrophic story to it, something strange happens. The phantom loses its fangs. You realize that a feeling is just a feeling. A tightness in the chest, a heat in the face, a heaviness in the limbs. It is uncomfortable, absolutely. But it is not lethal. It is just the body processing reality. To endure this requires a shedding of the ego. It means accepting that you are vulnerable, that you are mortal, that you can be hurt. And here is the unvarnished truth. Doing this will not win you any applause. In fact, if you stop outrunning your pain and begin to sit with it, you may become less palatable to the people around you. You will no longer be the frantic, high-energy distraction they relied upon. You may become quieter. You may draw boundaries that offend those who benefited from your lack of them. They may mistake your new, quiet acceptance for depression or defeat. You will not gain social dominance by facing your shadows. You may actually experience profound social friction, but for the first time in your life, you will belong entirely to yourself. The ultimate aim of the Stoic is not to manipulate the world into being painless. It is to recognize that we are built to endure the full spectrum of the human experience. When we flee from our emotional pain, we are subtly insulting our own nature. We are telling ourselves that we are too weak, too fragile to handle the reality of our own lives. We become exiles in our own minds, constantly looking over our shoulder, terrified of the very mechanisms designed to help us heal. There is no life hack that will make grief pleasant. There is no philosophical trick that will make betrayal feel like anything other than a knife in the back. The objective is not to stop the bleeding through sheer force of will, but to look at the blood and say, this is what happens when a human being lives and loves and loses. I am capable of bearing this. The next time you find yourself alone and the heavy dark tide begins to rise within you, do not reach for the nearest escape hatch. Do not demand that the pain justify itself, and do not beg it to leave. Let it wash over you. Let it pull you under for a moment. Feel the raw, terrifying weight of it. And as you sit there in the center of the very thing you have spent years running from, ask yourself this. If the worst thing you can feel is already here and you are still breathing, what is left to be afraid of?